you need to see how you're affecting people, and numbers can tell you that to an extent. You don't need to dwell on it, but it's something you need to understand. So if you're understanding this relationship between where your music comes from and how it affects people, that's a feedback loop of making better and better and better art.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Very Interesting People podcast, where we sit down with talented independent creators to talk about their craft, share some stories, and inspire you to get out there and create something yourself. I'm your host, Kiefer, and with me today is rapper and music producer Prince Computer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you go by Prince or by Dom? Which would you rather?
Really, whichever you prefer.
Right.
I don't mind when people call me Prince.
I'll
it's
call
pretty
you
cool.
Prince.
But
we'll
I
go
also
with Prince for the for the episode today. So yeah, awesome. So you are a local music producer, rapper.
Yes.
And do you want to tell us tell the people that don't already know a little bit about yourself, your music?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm Prince Computer. I also go by Dom. Started making music, or taking myself seriously with music, at least maybe about honestly, almost 2 years ago now.
Nice.
Actually, when I first released music, it was under a different name. I released music under Kudos. And then as Kudos, I released a tape called the Prince Computer tape, which had some really introspective, sadder, more mellow stuff on it. And I realized that that's what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to make. So I did a huge pivot, and now I make melodic trap with a heavy emphasis on introspection. I suppose candor is a word you could use, and being absolute vibey bops.
Vibey bops.
Yeah.
All right. So where'd you get your musical influence from? So that you have a very specific sound. I've heard some people compare it to other more contemporary artists, but let you explain it yourself.
Yeah, so my sound for my vocals was definitely a bit of a happy accident, because right when I was first transitioning into the Prince Computer sound, when I was starting to do more spacey and lyrical and singy, pretty much the only artist I could think of that I thought I wanted to sound like at the time for that was Lil Peep, my absolute favorite artist.
Nice.
I know it's super cliched to say, but Peep was huge for me. His passing was really big for me. So my vocal sound actually comes from a really, really shitty how to sound like Lil Peep tutorial.
Yeah.
And I realized it just didn't sound good, but I already put 30 minutes in making this vocal bus, and I just turned knobs with that, and that eventually turned into Waste My Time, that's track 4, I think, on Goth Prince, my first project. So with that as a starting point, I really liked the layer that was added from the chorus filter, sort of the widening and all. I don't know, I don't even really know how to describe it, and I really just tried to lean into that, adding lots of delay, lots of wet reverb, sort of make it sound like I'm around you. So in terms of vocal influence, the biggest one was Peep, 100%. For production influence, though, there's a lot of places I get my production influence from.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my trap percussion is definitely more Suicide Boys influence. Scrims beats I think are really cool. And I I don't know, Scrim, Joji is another big producer influence.
Yeah.
I don't know, just honestly whatever I'm listening to at the time, I see what I can bite while still keeping it my own. So even on some of my songs, even for the vocal influence, you can tell that there's also a bit of Joji there, or even some Trippy Red with me just screaming something I can't quite hit.
Fucking Trippy Red, man. I haven't heard that in a little while. But yeah, awesome.
Which is a damn shame. He's got some good new stuff.
I know. Yeah, the last time I heard anything about him was Eric Andre dressed up as him for Halloween. I'm oh yeah, I forgot about that dude. That's
someone told me that Trippy Red looks like Greta Thunberg cosplaying as Lil Wayne.
No fuck.
And it's terrifying how accurate that description is. Jesus Christ. That's a wild
If you don't know, just look up Trippy Red.
Oh, he is hard to look at, but in a very endearing way.
All right, so going back to your vocal processing and how you record your vocals, what's your writing process like? Because a lot of your songs are more of an in-depth listening process. They're very deep and, like you said, introspective, wordy. So tell us how you write that.
Yeah, so at risk of sounding a bit conceited, like I think really fast. Like my brain is running a lot. And you know, there's no one I think about more than me because I'm an arrogant music type.
Yeah.
And so whenever something like cool sounding or like just a unique thought or like a unique way to put something crosses my mind, I wish I brought it. But I have this literally just a black journal, just like I call it the black book because you know, why not? It's a black journal just covered in paint pen because I'm edgy and put a bunch of like skulls and edgy shit on it. And anytime something cool pops in my head, I whip it open. I literally just write it down. I don't try and make a verse. I don't try and spin it. I just get all the thoughts there. If I don't have it on me, I just text it to myself. And then usually I'll take the ideas from that. And then when I have a beat that I can really hear, like one of those ideas sort of drifting across in a bit of a way, that's when I'll sit down with a word editor, because people like pen and paper lyrics writing is terrible, and I don't know why people still do it. You should really be moving stuff around. And anyways, I'll sit down with like a word processor and like write the lyrics bar for bar, line for line. And yeah, I don't know. So it takes a lot of errant, you know, maybe like sort of poetic thoughts, and it turns it into a song over time. So that's also why my output is pretty low. Mm-hmm. It takes me a long time to write lyrics I'm happy with. Or sometimes I'll write lyrics I'm happy with, and then it doesn't work with the beat or something, and then it'll take like a year for me to actually put the lyrics on something. Yeah, Dead Boy actually, the title track off my newest tape, I wrote the hook for Dead Boy immediately after I wrote Beautiful People, which was my second release as Prince Computer.
And when was that released?
I think late 2018.
Oh wow, so that's quite a while.
Yeah,
that's interesting because literally the last people we had on, their writing process, they don't write anything down. They just pick thoughts and they're like, and they'll put it together. And it's like, it's so interesting. Everyone's writing process seems to be so different. It's either like, oh, they'll write down a whole song and then write a music to the song, or we had 538 on, they'll have a track or a loop and then they'll just write lyrics listening to that track inspired by the sound. And yours seems to be you pick and choose different aspects and then kind of mesh them together once you have enough material you want to work with.
Yeah, totally. That's actually one of my favorite parts about being like self-produced, is that any part of the process can inspire the other part. I write a dope hook or something that I hear over a beat, and then I make the beat, or I make a cool beat and then lyrics start popping in my head. Or sometimes I have a beat I'm stuck on and some lyrics I'm stuck on, and then I'm flipping through my book while playing the projects, and then I figure out how to finish both, right? Like, I think that I really like how enmeshed the whole process is.
Nice.
But like, yeah, that style of like lyric writing where you just sort of sit down and just get it out there while you're listening, that's really become popular lately, and it's made a lot of really cool songs.
Oh, I think so, because it's just more of like impromptu songwriting. Is just something comes in, sure, that sounds good, put it together. Totally. When you write, do you ever, apart from writing your thoughts down, do you ever have dedicated writing times where you sit through and sift through all the little notes that you've written and try and pick stuff apart, or does it just come to you?
Yeah, no, I don't really do dedicated writing times. I think that I don't do well with routines as a person. I'm really sporadic. So I think that if I told myself, like, this is when I'm going to sit down and try and get some lyrics down, that's usually when I make the most garbage.
Yeah, like, nothing comes out.
Yeah. Like, there's been a couple beats that were, like, really good, and I tried to force lyrics for those, and they just always came out, like, really corny and just not up to what I want to put out there as mine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so then going back to producing a bit, so you do everything yourself. Is that something that you taught yourself, other than you produce your beats, you're listening and learning all of like your DAW? So you work in FL?
Yeah, I do.
Did you just YouTube tutorial and like guidebooks and stuff like
that?
Yep,
yep, just 100% YouTube tutorial.
That seems to be like the modern musician now. It's like, oh yeah, I looked up how to make dope beats in FL Studio.
Well, and honestly, it's funny because like a lot of people trying to get into FL, they start from like the very basics. Like they look up how to use FL. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those people, and I tried to learn that way, and it's just so obtuse. Like there is so much you can do. It's such a powerful program.
Yeah.
So like honestly, what I found worked for me the best, when I actually started getting like real life good at producing, was when I just looked up how to make type beats.
Yeah.
It's like I was like I tried to learn like ground up, like how to use mixer buses and how to like use all the sampling features. And well, I'm trying to throw out like cool techie terms, but frankly, like I learned how to use FL with type beats. Like I'm not very technically inclined. I made garbage just over and over and over. But then when I started listening to like producers who were like, this is how you make a type beat for this guy. Like I started with Suicide Boys type beat. And then I started looking at like Lil Uzi type beats. And then from like just listening to all these type beats, I sort of developed my own style just from like combining all of the core elements from those, like just following someone's cook up to the T and then remembering which knobs I had to turn to do that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, after doing that enough times, I was able to turn the knobs myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the artist's method of like you're working, you're like tracing, and then you're kind of copying some real styles, and eventually you mix all of your influences together, and then just one day you just don't touch any of those how-tos or other reference images, and you just make something. You're like, perfect.
Yeah, that's a
chef's kiss.
That's a really cool way to phrase it. Actually,
Yeah.
that analogy works extremely well.
Yeah, it's just so many artists I know. It's like always people like when you start, and it's sad because a lot of other people don't. Because like especially with like filmmaking and music, if you're doing something that someone else does, you're like, oh, you're just ripping them off. But with art, it's like you make it, and you draw. You say you're tracing out of like a still from like a comic book or from an animated movie or just a piece of art you found online, and you trace, and then you stop tracing, you just copy, and it's slowly you just kind of take the training wheels off.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important for like anyone when they're doing something. It's like it's okay if as long as you're not trying to profit off of ripping off someone else, as long as you're practicing by mimicking stuff that you like until you get to the point where like I'm confident in my skills to do something in that vein, but all my own.
It's funny because you talking about like the ripping off aspect of getting better reminded me. So right after I released Goth Prince, my first like real project on the Prince computer, I got like more feedback than I thought I would. Frankly, I thought I would just throw things out into the ether and then like have it on the back catalog.
On SoundCloud, right? That you're putting them out, or on other platforms?
It was actually on Spotify that Goth Prince came out. I did all my QDOS stuff on SoundCloud, and then I was gonna start releasing music as QDOS, and then I had the whole Prince computer personal awakening, and I was like, no. But I had already set up like my distribution service, so. But yeah, no. Right after that, I got way more feedback than I thought it would. Of course, a lot of negative. And the negative feedback was always claiming I was ripping someone off. Yeah. But none of them agreed on who I was ripping off.
It's usually a good sign.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'll take it. like I wear my influences on my sleeve. If they take that as ripping off, like.
No, like I've got that a lot. Like doing anything on the internet, it's like someone else did it first. And like, there's no such thing as originality anymore.
Oh,
everyone's done something before, but as long as you do your own something, it's like. It's your stuff. It's good.
Just because every idea has been had doesn't mean no one can do it better.
Yeah. Speaking of originality, your aesthetic, especially on social media, I keep saying social now, I feel like a boomer, is pretty specific. It's really stand out. Like one of my other, if you're on YouTube watching this podcast, if you're not, go check it out on YouTube. It exists. But I interviewed Prince for one of my other like mini docs I did for Okanagan Smash League, and just showing up to play Smash, he was like totally just set. He was like styling on everyone in the building, and I was like, damn, that's commitment. So tell me a bit about your aesthetic. Where did it come from? When did you start? You mentioned before you started rolling that you had acrylics on since the summer. Yeah. Which is impressive. Because if you don't know, those are a pain in the ass to put on and to take off and to just have. So it's very commendable. But tell me about your aesthetic, where that came from.
Yeah. So funny enough, people who knew me like growing up and stuff, they're kind of like they sort of bounce back and forth between calling me like a hack culture vulture and a most transformed person they know. Yeah. Because like growing up, I was a really shit dresser. I didn't really care how I looked. Like, you know, you just mentioned how I'm like part of the Smash League. Like I was a big nerd. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that's not what I cared about. Yeah. But I like growing up, I always did really like a lot of my stylistic influences, like hip hop scene and punk scene and emo scene and a bit of the like goth scene. Although people keep using the term goth and throwing that around. Goth clothes are weird. I don't wear goth clothes. Yeah. I mean, I throw goth around, but like I wouldn't really use it to describe myself.
I think goth is like a style. Like when I think goth, I don't always think of like the classic like 90s Disney movies, kind of like goth kids. It's more of like the gothic aesthetic of just like it's dark and kind of like Renaissance-y, as Renaissance-y as modern dress can get. But
but then so like I was always a fan of those influences, but then I never like showed that. I never externally demonstrated, what slice of subculture I inhabited. But then when I graduated, my hair was too long and I drunkenly shaved my head at a party. And then as it was growing in, I was like, if there ever was a time to dye my hair, it'd be now. Because I just had a tennis ball head, so I dyed it green. And then after I dyed it green, I was a nerd with bad clothes walking around with green hair. So I was like, okay, I need to lean into this. How do I make my tennis ball head look like it suits me? And so I was like, well, rule number 1, wear black. Everything goes with black. But now I was just a nerd wearing all black. Yeah. So then I really thought long and hard about like, I want to look different. I want to look unique. And I drew inspiration from a bunch of places. Primarily like a lot of the like modern hip hop streetwear. But then also I was friends with a bunch of skaters, and so I started picking up some of their skate clothes. And then honestly, probably the biggest like breakthrough for my fashion was Instagram e-girls. Because Instagram e-girls, now don't get me like
that's a culture. That's a culture.
Yeah, no. Don't get me fucked up. They are styling. They are committed. They are Depop cruisers. They've got all their cool chains. Like the goth revival. Yeah. It was always sort of a weird sideline, like, okay, sure. Yeah. And then hot chicks started doing it.
And then everyone's like, damn, I'm going to get on this train.
Exactly. And then I was like, you know what? Like, yeah, I can do this. And then from there, like, my fashion choices since have just been a combination of me not having enough money for my own or for, like, store-bought cool clothes. So kind of just fucking up things I have. Probably, one of my favorite like pairs of pants I have. It's literally just some white painter's pants that I picked up from like a hardware store or not like a workwear store. Yeah. And then Dead Rose from here in town, another musician, he just painted all over them. Nice. Yeah. I was just like, hey, if I buy you some fabric paint, will you just go nuts? And he was like, yeah.
Do you do a lot of thrifting then?
Surprisingly, no. Just because I am a lot bigger than people realize.
Yeah. We're both pretty tall guys. Yeah. That's when you go to the thrift store, I just went thrifting the other day. Yeah. Everything I found that looked great, it was like, yeah, that's it looks like a t-shirt on me. Yeah. I can't wear this.
Yeah. For me, when I go thrifting, everything that's cool doesn't fit. Oh yeah. Or everything that doesn't fit is cool. So like, I actually don't have much luck thrifting. I usually just like, I'm a big fan of winners though. Winners hits.
Fuck yeah, Winners used to be a thing that only my mom would do, and then now all my friends are like, let's go hit up Winners, dude.
No, seriously.
So they're just like a liquidation store basically.
Yeah,
so you get just the weirdest stuff comes through there, and you never know what you're gonna get. It's like a thrift store, but with like fast fashion and like sometimes some really good stuff.
Yeah. My 3 like favorite pieces, like single pieces of clothing, are all Winners pieces that I made into customs, or that like people helped me make into customs. Nice. Yeah. I was totally. Oh yeah, just like a little side note on like me saying like I'm bigger than a lot of people realize. Yeah. The whole like goth weird visual aesthetic, like sad all the time stuff. Everyone assumes that I'm like a 5'9", slightly chubby dude. Yeah. The first time I ever met a fan in person. There was someone who DM'd me. They were from Van, so it wasn't far. And they only knew me through my music. I met them, and the first thing they say is, "You are way bigger than I expected."
Yeah, it's fucking like I first met you like outside of music before I found your music. I'm like, damn. Yeah. Like that's like usually I'm the tallest guy in the room, but I was like, oh shit, I got some competition now.
The wildest part is that my brother's actually 4 inches taller than me.
Jesus Christ! And how tall are you?
I think I'm like 6'1", 6'2". I don't know, around there.
I don't know. I don't go to my grandma's house to get measured anymore. It's usually like the classic like white people thing is your grandma's like, oh, let's get the meter stick out for Canadians. Let's get the meter stick out and see how tall you are. And I'm like, okay, grandma. Yeah, I think I'm like in the 6'2" or 3 range. I don't know. Everyone's like, you're not that tall, or some people are like, oh, you're way taller. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway. So going back to your aesthetic for your clothing,
Yeah.
and your music influences, did they meet at all? Is that something that you intentionally played into, or did they kind of just progress on their own until one point you're like, oh wait, I dress the way that my music would sound, I guess.
That's a good question, because I think I want them to meet.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my musical influences I think are very cool dressers, except for the Suicide Boys. They low-key dress like shit, but like that's okay. Their songs are bops. Like Joji has this really cool, like clean and classic, but then like glammed up style. Lil Peep was just over the top, like super sick customs and denim and fuzzy sweaters and just whatever looked. That man had drip out the ass, like. And like then like even some of like the smaller musical influences I'm like of mine, like Dead Rose, I talked about him before, and I've never told him this, and you shouldn't, but he's also a huge inspiration for me. So like that's why I get like some of my custom work done by him, because he does his own custom work and I want a little piece of that. So like, there's a lot in my musical influences I'd like to emulate with regards to style, but at the end of the day, like I currently don't really have the facilities to do it to the extent where I feel I can say, yes, it does. They do meet. There is a convergence point.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And so then moving into, you've been playing some live shows lately.
Yeah.
Have you been playing live music for a while, or is that something that's new to you?
I played piano growing up and did like piano recitals when I was a kid. But in terms of like my songs that I wrote, it's been a lot fast. My first show ever was like early January.
So when you started doing that, was it interesting bringing your like I'm gonna say bedroom pop, but more of that like DIY style out into like a live venue? Did you find it was hard to transition, or was it something that you were really ready for and you were prepared for from just waiting for that moment?
If I wasn't prepared for it, I sure as hell convinced myself I was. Yeah. I remember, the first time I felt nervous, but like I managed to like psych myself up really hard. Yeah. And I remember I'm fully gonna like psych myself up again. I said a cold ass line to Kenny, Kenny boy. I was about to go up on stage and he goes, "Are you nervous?" And I go, "Nah, I was born for this." I didn't believe a word of it, but saying it made me go like, okay, well, I just told someone that, so now I have to believe it. Otherwise, I'm just a liar.
And so performing as a vocalist or rapper, you're not playing an instrument. What do you do with yourself? Did you like watch performances and try to like figure out what to do? Because I just find like when I used to play on stage, I was a bassist. I was like the kind of stand still, and then eventually I tried to do like the Metallica, the crab walk with the bass. I'm like, I can do this and I can bounce around, but like I don't know what to do with myself on stage. So many people have great energy, but it's usually with the instrument. They flow with that. Yeah. So how does rapping work into a stage presence for you?
I'll let you know when I find out. The first time I ever did a live show was at the Final Destination Black Box show that some of the local like 2,500 affiliated guys were doing. I found out I was going up about 40 minutes before I went up. Oh, no. I was actually running set list for that show, and there was a 10-minute gap that they had meant for it to be there. Yeah. There was about a 10-minute gap, and I asked Miggs, who was show running at the time, I was like, why? What? And then he was like, I don't know. And then I was like, can I go up? And he was like, sure. And I played 2 songs. As I've done more live performances, I've gotten a bit more accustomed to like intentionality and how I'm moving and trying to reflect what's happening in the song, which is super fun to do with my newest project, Dead Boy, because there's a lot of changing moods in the project.
Is there a lot of energy that you can bring, or is there some of your songs that are more mellow? Is that harder to bring the energy on stage?
The mellow songs are hard, but at the same time, people kind of respect that if I'm taking a knee during a mellow song, it's like an edgy throwback to when X did that, and they can respect that. But yeah, like most of my movement comes from like in my partying phase back in high school, we listened to hip hop, right? So we would like dance and thrash to hip hop. So I just kind of do that, but to my hip hop. It's just a bit tough though for some of my more vocally intensive songs. Like Pretty Skull is outside of my range. I am 100% in Passaggio the whole time I sing that song. So it takes a lot of breath. Like Passaggio, you either scream or you don't hit the notes. Yeah. And when I'm trying to jump around and thrash, like you'll see it in my live performances. Sometimes I just can't finish the line, move the mic away, huge breath, and then get back to it.
Yeah. I mean, I at least with an audience too, like I've seen so many people on like YouTube especially. It's like,
Yeah.
this song sounds so much better in the recording. Why are they so bad at doing it live? And it's like, yeah, in a recording you're in a controlled space and you're just sitting there doing your
Yeah.
vocals. Like this dude's trying to bring a fucking huge amount of energy, just jumping around, going crazy, and then he's trying to hit these falsettos, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna really struggle with that if you don't have like a full tank of gas.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
yeah.
it's like if only you knew how many takes are in like 2-minute songs I make.
Oh yeah.
Like, and another thing is I use autotune in my vocal processing 100%.
Stylistically? Or?
Yeah, well, I claim stylistically, but everyone wants to poke holes in that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the thing is people will say like, oh, like why do you need so many takes? Like autotune, doesn't it just do it for you? The answer is no. Your favorite artist that uses autotune will keep you in a key, but it will not program your voice to do notes.
It's
if
like
yeah, exactly. if your voice is being pitch shifted to the exact notes you want it to be at, that's not autotune, that's a vocoder. You might be using autotune as a vocoder, which is inefficient and dumb, but like you still have to be able to get up that high. Like if I'm trying to do like a high B flat in B flat major, if I'm trying to hit that top note and I miss it, then I'm going to be hitting a G natural, which is, yeah, it's in the key, but it's super dissonant with whatever's happening like behind me if it's in B flat and if I'm staying on like tonic dominant and all that. So yeah, it's like people, it's hard for them to understand the distinction between like the studio session and the live performance sometimes, and then they'll just go like, oh, it's because he didn't have autotune. It's like, yo, I don't know if you've heard Travis Scott perform, but like he is not leaning into the autotune. He is still hitting those notes. Actually, funny, the best way to see an example of what I'm talking about, where it just keeps the notes in key but doesn't, give you a melody, go look up Travis Scott falling off the stage. Travis Scott is performing with a live auto-tune mic, and he falls off the stage and he goes, but it gets auto-tuned into the key of the song he was playing. It's the funniest sounding thing on earth, dude.
Jesus. Oh, I play a clip of that. Well, okay. For the go look it up. Well, that sounds very entertaining. So usually near the tail end of the show, we like to wrap it up with a bit of an advice section for aspiring musicians, or in our case, musicians, because we've had musicians on recently, but for like anyone who's in the craft, advice to that. So do you have any advice for people who are just getting into either producing or rapping, or maybe both, getting into the scene? What would you recommend they do or try out or learn?
Well, I would say the very first thing is what every artist ever who's been asked to give advice says, is that you will suck at first.
Yeah.
You're going to suck. My first song I ever released is still on SoundCloud on my page. It's called Hentai City. That was released under the QDOS days. It's still there. You can go listen to Dead Boy, and then you can go listen to Hentai City and see what just 2 years of sounding like shit and still sounding like shit turns into. Not to say that I'm some master of my craft now. I still think I sound like shit, but the difference is there. Another piece of advice totally is get inspired. Don't be afraid to wear your influences on your sleeve, especially with regards to hip-hop. The entire genre of hip-hop is rooted in sampling and biting people's flows and making something that was already there your own. Mm-hmm. If you are always trying to do your own thing, if you're always shying away from what people have already done, it crosses a threshold from being unique to being just like a musical non sequitur. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, you don't want to just be like downloading type beats from YouTube and spitting recycled bars from your favorite rappers, but don't be afraid to try and sound like them. And I would say like the last thing is make sure you're having fun. Like when I was releasing music as QDOS, I wasn't having fun. Felt like an obligation. I had one song blow up, and I was like, now I have to do this. I'm wasting this platform if I don't do this. And my music sucked when I was doing it out of obligation. It was terrible, like worse than Hentai City. But that stuff's not on SoundCloud anymore. That stuff's all nuked. Excuse me. Like make sure you are having fun with it. If having fun means starting over and joining a punk band, like that'd be better than soullessly cranking out hip hop bangers that you don't even like making.
Yeah.
Like, people don't give listeners enough credit. Like they can tell when something's half-assed. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice because it's not exactly like I'm making it off this. But
That's okay. Like
yeah.
just getting anyone's input on something like that, like
Totally.
any artist, like having those voices come together and just if one person can take that advice and it'll help them get somewhere, that's all we're trying to do. That's the main goal.
Totally.
Just like check out some great artists and then what do those artists have to say about what they do? And that's like what you said, like just having fun is the main thing. Like it doesn't matter if dudes you're gonna 1 million streams, you're forgetting like one. It's like as long as you're enjoying yourself and making that good music, you're an artist regardless.
Totally. I went from like an average of like minimum 10K per track back in the Kudos days, and now I'm like pushing 1,000 on every song if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Which like, I feel like I could pretty easily be bitter about that, but I knew that if I stuck with the Kudos thing, I would just be a corny fraud my whole life.
Do you ever I guess because yours is one of the more like specifically online because a lot of your stuff is through streams and online production. Do you really avoid the numbers, or is that something that you just kind of look to for that makes me feel better that someone's listening, or do you just like tune it out when it comes to making stuff?
You need to see how you're affecting people, and numbers can tell you that to an extent. Like I said, you don't need to codify it into your creative process. You don't need to, dwell on it, but it's something you need to understand. Because in my super heady arts major opinion of music, it is inherently a universal form of communication. Maybe it doesn't translate the same everywhere, but someone's going to hear something pretty and they're going to tell you it's pretty.
Yeah.
And it's also a very self-reflective art form. Music doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from creators, and the creators usually pull from themselves for inspiration. So if you're understanding this relationship between where your music comes from and how it affects people, that's a feedback loop of making better and better and better art, And I think that, numbers are not the only way to do that. But if you're just ignoring your numbers flat out, one, you should be monetizing things that get good numbers. Pay attention to those numbers. Yeah. And two, you will not know how you're affecting people. You know?
Would you say share everything that you make? That's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is that, sometimes in my old back, I'll have made something a long time ago, like maybe like a home movie. Yeah. I'll put it out there. I'm like, I don't like that anymore. I'm going to take it away. Do you think it's nice just to have your process out there and your progression? Or do you think you should pick and choose what you're putting out?
Yeah, if you want to do that, if you want an aspect of your character to be the growth and the progress of your art, yeah, do that. Do I think that you should do that? Absolutely not. No. As a creator, like it or hate it, especially with the modern landscape, like with socials.
Yeah.
Your character and who you are becomes a huge part of that. If you want to cultivate an image and your older work runs contrary to that, it can almost be a bit confusing, you know? Or in the same vein, like, you maybe put everything out there when you're learning and you can get a lot of feedback. But if you know what you want to sound like, if you know what people want to hear, there's no reason to crowd your body of work with things that aren't up to that standard, especially if you're hesitant about putting them out there, like if you're hesitant about putting some of your old work out there and then you hear some mantra of share everything and now you feel pressured to do that, that is when you should especially not be putting things out there. If you are making art that is to be consumed, you need to make sure that it's what you want people to consume of you. You're handing out pieces of yourself. Make sure it's the good part. No one wants chopped liver.
Well, maybe, make a couple old people upset about that.
You think that's the hottest take I've made all interview?
Yeah, no, that's the hottest take, guys. Leave in the comments. Do you like chopped liver? Go send a bunch of hate to Prince Computer about how much you love chopped liver. That's good though. That's pretty different than what I've heard, because a lot of people I know, at least outside the music space, it's like share what you've done before so that you can show your progression. I think that's good to picking and choosing, because I think having something that still represents you, because you could have, like, an example, like say, what's a band that's gone off the deep end with some weird experimental stuff. But I'm sure that there's dozens where you'll
Weezer,
yeah,
the cover albums.
you'll just switch genres completely, and some people will just be like, oh, you're gonna ruin your fan base possibly with that. So it's like, take that into consideration if you're really gonna, if you want to share that. Do you think it's gonna positively impact others in your career, or is it something that you can just share within a small group?
Well, and I think with regards to musical innovation, I think it should be done piecemeal.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing an album to album total tone shift, like, yeah, that's just bad business, you know? It'd be like if every time you got a Coke from McDonald's, there was a random flavor shot in it, you know?
It's like Subway.
Yeah. well, except that you choose that at Subway.
Yeah.
I'm talking about roll the dice, like, and like, yeah, sure, some people might like the cherry,
Yeah.
but
But
I
not
don't think
everybody.
anyone's here for almond Coke, you
Yeah.
know? But I think that if you can, yeah, like a piecemeal introduction of new ideas and new sounds, I think can work extremely well. I mean, shit, Tyler just won a Grammy for Best Rap Album,
Yeah.
and he didn't even release a rap album this
Yeah.
year or last year, because he's been slowly transitioning from his super, like, edgy, break the rules, aggressive
Yeah.
sound, and has been just drip feeding softer, more introspective, emotional elements since all the way back in, 2013 with Wolf.
Yeah.
And then, 2015's Cherry Bomb, which is even more artistically inclined. 2017 is Flower Boy, which is basically a dream pop album with
Yeah.
all the indie features. And now you have something completely new in 2019 that, I don't even call a hip hop album. And his fans are eating this shit up because he's given it in the context of who he already is,
Mm-hmm.
and has created a step ladder of, sorry, I bumped the mic.
It's okay.
He's made a step ladder of musical, or he's made a ladder to the musical peak rather than ride the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ride the elevator, you don't appreciate the trip, and neither do your fans.
That's great. That's a lot to take in. Make sure you're taking notes for that advice call there. It's probably one of the bigger ones we've had. But thank you so much again for coming on,
Yeah,
Prince.
for sure. Thanks for having me.
Now is the time to talk about what do you got to promote. Just let it rip.
Yeah, right now I have no major projects planned, so if you want to keep streaming my stuff, Dead Boy came out not too long ago. I'm very proud of it. It's a huge piece of work for me, so you can go ahead and listen to that if you want. I'm Prince Computer on everything: Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Deezer.
Tidal.
Yeah.
Is
and-
Tidal not just for specific people anymore? It's for anyone?
No, it's for anyone.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, and you know what? You Napster boys are eating too, because I'm on there as well.
Oh, damn.
So get out there, have a listen.
Vintage.
Yeah. Yeah, get out there, have a listen. Prince Computer, Dead Boy.
Nice. Awesome. And if you want some more Very Interesting People podcast, we're on everything. So for the podcast, Very Interesting People podcast, look it up on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all the other smaller ones. You can check us out on social at TheVIPcast. That's the word the, VIPCAST. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Check it out. And if you're watching it on YouTube, go check it out on the podcast platforms. Leave us a review on iTunes. And go check out Prince Computer. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for coming on, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me.